All right, today I want to go over what research confirms are the top 3 signs that essentially doom any relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to break up. It just means that at least one of you isn't going to be happy. One of you isn't going to feel safe or connected or ultimately valued in this relationship. And some of you are in that spot right now because of one of the 3 things that I'm going to talk about. The presence of any one of these 3 things only destroys trust and intimacy and playfulness in your relationship. And even though it's extremely difficult, even though I know you love and care about this person, we need to remember that relationships need more than just love to survive, right? Frankly, I don't care if they say they love you. I care about whether they're loving you with their actions. I care about whether they're a safe person to be around. I care about whether they're considerate. Everyone has a different definition of what love is. Ask them. I bet you'll find it's massively different than yours. The only question that matters in this is, are you both building a foundation together of trust and mutual respect and emotional safety? Don't tell me you love someone, but you aren't willing to hold yourself accountable to any patterns or behaviors that are hurting that foundation instead of strengthening it, because that's not a sustainable relationship long term. So let's dive into the 3 signs that predict a relationship will end. The first one is you can't have tough conversations without it turning into a fight. Now, it's true that this one is broad and general, and a lot of us probably fall into this category, but that doesn't make it any less destructive. The truth is, relationships cannot survive without some form of honesty. I'm not saying your partner should be able to walk around and just say critical, hurtful things all the time. That's not honesty, that's being a jerk. But if a relationship has any chance at being mutually fulfilling, that requires a safe space for respectful vulnerability. That doesn't mean constantly criticizing your partner for what they didn't do. It doesn't mean being rude or disrespectful. It means being honest about your inner world and your feelings and needs. Everything in your relationship breaks down when one person doesn't feel safe to be honest. And if you want to take the first step in strengthening and protecting your foundation as a couple together, sit down right now and ask each other, do you feel safe to be honest with me? When's the last time you felt like you needed to walk on eggshells? When's the last time that you suppressed your needs instead of bringing them up? The problem is the couples who are at the most risk for breaking up or divorcing rarely ask each other this question, or at least one of them won't. Do you know why? Because they think these types of exercises are stupid and useless. And yet they're going to be the ones that are blindsided when their partner eventually leaves. All right, so what do I really mean when I say you can't have tough conversations together? What I mean by that is that one or both of you doesn't have the ability or interest in A, bringing things up in a respectful, vulnerable way without blame, criticism, or shame, or B, you respond by getting defensive, counter-blaming, gaslighting, deflecting, or simply shutting down altogether. The biggest problem that I'm seeing is that both parties rarely understand the negative cycles that they get caught in, and they have no idea how incredibly harmful those can be to their relationship. Think of all the divorces and breakups. How many of them had a common thread? We can't have conflict without it turning into a fight. I bet it was a very high percentage. And once at least one person doesn't feel like they can be honest without things turning into a fight, I promise you that only leads to distance and disconnection. It leads to loneliness, and eventually that sadness turns into resentment, and the relationship is dying regardless of whether you break up or not. Here's how things break down. One person brings up an issue that's actually been bothering them for a long time, but shocker, they didn't feel safe to bring it up. So now whatever emotion they're feeling is amplified, right? So they either bring it up with passive aggressiveness, criticism, they explode over something small, maybe even unrelated. They use accusation or blame to try to really drive their point home. How do you think that other person is going to react? That's right, they get defensive, they dismiss, they deflect, they invalidate their partner's feelings or experience without even realizing it. All right, let me give you a concrete example. Partner A has noticed a pattern for weeks that partner B is often on their phone, right? And it's been really annoying for them. So one day they see an opportunity to bring it up and they say, oh, please, all you do is play on your phone. It's not like you care about hanging out with me or making sure that everything gets done around here. Now, I can almost guarantee you that that's going to start a fight. Why? Because one, they made a judgment. You're always on your phone. That's completely subjective. 2, they made an accusation. You don't care about hanging out with me. And 3, they made a criticism. You're neglectful. How is partner B going to respond? They're going to defend, dismiss, deflect. Are you serious? I'm always on my phone? That's rich coming from somebody who literally just put theirs down. Yeah, I guess I'm always the bad guy. Yeah, I don't care about you, of course. I guess that's why I work 60 hours a week. Yeah, I don't care about you or the family at all. Now, on the surface, it's easy to take sides, right? Maybe you identify more with partner A and you're like, they were just trying to express a frustration. Partner B didn't even listen. They just wanted some attention. They completely dismissed them. That's the real problem here. Or maybe you identify with partner B and you felt attacked a lot in your relationship. relationship. You felt smothered and accused of things that you didn't do. And you don't appreciate people telling you what your intentions were without asking. You don't appreciate people leading with disrespect and criticism and then expecting you to respond with curiosity and understanding, right? Because that's not fair. They certainly didn't lead with curiosity and understanding, did they? That's the real problem. None of this would have happened if they just brought it up in a healthy way. It's so easy to take sides, but here's what we miss. Most often, the vast majority of the time, we're talking about two people who love each other. We're talking about two people who want to get it right for each other, right? They want to feel valued in this relationship, both of them. Most often, these are two people who want a mutually fulfilling relationship with each other, but they don't understand their needs or triggers or how to vulnerably and respectfully articulate them, or how to listen to their partners without feeling like a failure and defending themselves. The vast majority of the time, this is two people who really do want to have tough conversations and still love each other at the end of the day, right? So what's getting in their way? What's blocking them from that goal? They're both getting triggered and they don't know it. That's why you both need to get really good at recognizing when discussions have turned into fights and slow everything way down. Once we start raising our voice, once we start talking over each other, once we start using always and never, once we start finger pointing, once we start feeling like we have to defend ourselves, right? We're being unfairly attacked. That's when the conflict has to stop. There's simply no reason to continue. Now I know what you're thinking, yeah, but nothing's been resolved. That's true, but you wouldn't have resolved it anyways if you would have kept talking. In fact, you would have made things worse. The only solution is to recognize when we're getting heated and de-escalate immediately. That's the only way that there's any hope of both people feeling heard in this discussion. So how do we do that? We both need to get better at saying the words, I came in a bit hot. I led with criticism and passive aggressiveness. I realize that now. I was desperate to be heard. I didn't even know if I deserved to feel upset about this, so I kept it in for so long that eventually I just exploded. That's on me. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. Can we start over? Or maybe you're on the side where you need to get better at saying, hey, I feel a bit attacked here. I feel like I can hear myself getting defensive. I feel like I'm being boxed into a corner. Like you've already rehearsed this argument in your head and I've already been judged. You're just telling me why I'm guilty. And I don't think that's your intent. And maybe that's just the way I'm interpreting the words. Can we start over? Or can I take a 15-minute break? I promise I'll come back. That's the trick in all this. Recognize your part. Take accountability for your part. How are you unintentionally pushing your partner away? Ask them how that impacts them and do something new. For me, my wife and I had to come up with some agreements, some conflict agreements, and I think that they would help you as well. One of the conflict agreements is just simply not to let resentment build up. But that requires something from each of you, doesn't it? It requires an openness, a willingness to be a safe space for someone to bring something up to. It requires intentional check-ins. It's not easy, but it is necessary. The next agreement, when bringing something up, we do so without criticism or blame. Just speak about what happened. Challenge the stories that you've created in your head where you're only seeing them through a negative lens. Give the most generous interpretation of your partner's actions. Talk about your experience, not their intentions. Just talk about how you feel. So instead of saying, you never take me out anymore, which is void of any actual feelings or vulnerability, we say, I really miss it when you used to take me out. I guess I'm feeling a bit sad and scared that maybe you don't want to spend as much time with me anymore. Is that something that you'd be open to doing more? Because I would love it. Interestingly, they're actually both trying to communicate the same thing, but with massively different strategies. One is with brute force. Maybe if I guilt trip or shame them, they'll change. The other is with actual vulnerability, inviting them into our inner world. Now, you might still say, none of this matters. It doesn't matter how I bring things up. They're still going to take it as an attack. They're still going to get defensive or push me away or shut down. And you might be right. I'm simply saying that's what's destroying the connection and trust in your relationship. The hard truth about relationships is it takes two to make this work. One person can influence a relationship in a positive direction, but connection and closeness always require two people. And sometimes you just have one. The final agreement is how we are going to respond. When someone expresses a frustration, desire, a feeling, we recognize that whoever brought it up has the floor. We both have jobs to do. Partner A is focused on expressing with respectful vulnerability. Partner B is focused on actually understanding this person. And you can't understand if you're not willing to close your mouth occasionally and just listen and occasionally ask the right questions. And once you feel like you understand, summarize that point back to them. That's a very validating thing to actually feel heard, right? Don't do it like a robot. Do it like someone who actually wants to know their heart. That's a big difference than what so many people get caught in, which is one partner brings something up, the other one counterblames. Well, you do the same thing to me. Because in that moment, you've taken the focus off understanding them and turned it back to You. You need to understand me now. This derails the entire conflict. And if your question is, yeah, well, don't my needs matter? I mean, when am I supposed to bring up my concerns? Any other time. You could have brought them up 5 minutes ago before they brought up theirs, but you didn't. If the only time you're bringing up your pain is when someone else shares theirs, that's why your relationship is dying. Work on validating their experience as real. Find a way that their feelings make sense. Feelings, not accusations. Find a way that their feelings make sense. Sadness, frustration, hurt, anxious, scared. This is why this system is massively different than the old system. You wouldn't want to validate their accusations or blame. But in the new system, those are gone. I told them to stop leading with those things. So now you can validate why their feelings make sense given what they experience or didn't experience. You're both worth understanding, okay? You're worth a safe space to be honest with each other. We are worth kindness and respect when we express. They are worth feeling heard and understood when they express. And I'm not saying this is going to solve all your issues immediately. I'm saying this is the first step into having discussions about the complexity of relationships, but maintaining an element of connection and love with each other. Because conflict is simply an opportunity to understand each other, right? Something happened. Our partner's feeling something or needing something from us. How many of us don't want them to share that need? How many of us truly want them to just bury it? Not very many. Most of us want to feel connected to our partner. Most of us want to feel like we can get it right for them. But it's the way we go about doing that that makes all the difference between whether we stay together and we're happy or we just become another statistic. So understand the cycle that you're both falling into. I stay silent to keep the peace, and I build up resentment, and then I express in an unhealthy way. Or I get defensive when I feel attacked or blamed, regardless of the words you choose. That's on me. Then take it a step further. I realize that when I blame, you shut down. That makes sense. And I realize that when I get defensive, you feel abandoned, right? That makes sense. Let's do something different from now on. Is that hard? Sure. I could talk about how to do that all day, but this is the first step. All right, I'm sorry that went long. I get a little excited when I talk about conflict. Sue me. Let's move on to the second sign that a relationship is essentially doomed, and that is a power imbalance. Here's the truth. Relationships can't survive without equality and respect. And if one partner believes that they're more important than the other, if one partner thinks they can treat the other person however they want, if one partner has the attitude, it's my way or the highway, I can promise you that relationship is dying. Now, once again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to break up. But love will not grow in that environment. And there's a lot of self-centered, power-hungry partners out there that will never change, right? They're not going to watch any of these videos. They're not going to go to counseling because they just don't care. And for those couples, I can't talk to them. I can't tell them that their self-centeredness is going to destroy any chance at a successful relationship because they won't hear it, right? Their narcissism and ego has completely taken over. The only person I can talk to is you. Don't tolerate a power imbalance in your relationship. Now, I'm not telling you to set boundaries with someone who is abusive, because that's not safe. The only thing we do in those situations is get out, right? I'm just telling you and reminding you that you never deserve to be treated that way. If you can't talk to them the same way they talk to you without being punished, that's not a safe relationship. You deserve someone who treats you with kindness and respect. And nobody's perfect, 100%, but relationships that survive learn how to take accountability for the moments that they mess up. If this is a chronic issue where one person holds all the power and control in your relationship, I can promise you that's only going to slowly destroy the relationship. Because there's just no place for power or control in a healthy relationship. There's no room for self-centeredness, right? The only way this works is if we're a team, if we're in this together with kindness and respect. Relationships only work when we're sacrificing for each other mutually, and there's no sacrifice that's going to come from a narcissistic person. That, of course, doesn't mean that it's always going to be 50-50. Some days it's 80-20, right? Even in a healthy relationship. But that needs to be reciprocal. That's what brings it back to 50-50. When it's not reciprocal and you feel like you're the one carrying all the emotional weight of the relationship, when you feel like you have to walk on eggshells or else you're going to be punished, I promise you that you're going to burn out and detach eventually. And if you know that this relationship is toxic and you know you deserve better and you keep telling yourself, maybe it'll just get better, right? Maybe I can find the right words not to trigger them. Maybe I'm the problem because that's what they keep telling me. I would really encourage you to check out the video I just did on being trapped in a trauma bond. Because fulfilling relationships are all about equality and respect. And there is no respect if they think they're more important than you are. And just to pick on men for 1 second, Dr. John Gottman, who is one of the best researchers in this field, says, quote, "When a man can't accept the influence of his female partner, there's an 81% chance that relationship implodes," end quote. Why do you think that is? Because that man refuses to share power. He refuses to listen to someone else's perspective. He refuses to put someone else's needs above his own. He refuses to say no to his ego and serve someone else. That's what kills a relationship. Now, 100% a woman can be guilty of that as well, but men especially need to listen to that. Now, am I saying that a man just needs to do everything she says all the time? No, I never said that. I said this needs to be a mutually respectful partnership. And we can learn how to handle those discussions like adults who love each other, right? And selfishness and pride and ego just aren't a part of that equation. All right, that brings us to the number one sign that a relationship is doomed, and that is the presence of contempt. All right, so what is contempt? Contempt is a belief of superiority. It's looking down your nose at someone. Contempt is a disgust for someone else. It's seeing someone as unworthy of your attention or respect. Now, contempt is a little different than the power trip personality. I mean, both are dangerous to a relationship, but some people are just dominant in nature, right? That's their personality for whatever reason. Maybe trauma, maybe something else. They're just dominant, self-centered people. Now, I still believe that that destroys connection and intimacy over time, but contempt is a little different. Contempt doesn't always have to have a dominating component to it. It's simply a belief that I'm better than them. I don't see them as worthy of respect. So it obviously makes sense that the same doctor I referenced earlier, Dr. John Gottman, puts contempt as his number one predictor of divorce, because a healthy relationship just can't exist when the other person views their partner like that. It's just not a recipe for success. Now, I will add one caveat. Sometimes people develop contempt for another person simply out of their own selfishness and pride, right? Nothing even happened in the relationship per se. They just view themselves as better than everyone else. That's their sense of superiority. So think of narcissists in this category. But there's another category where contempt shows up, and that's the people pleasers that have been in relationships where they've felt so chronically neglected and overlooked for so long because they've tried so hard to bend over backwards. They've done all the work in this relationship to try to make it healthy. And they're not just angry for being mistreated. Now they resent that person. They don't look down their nose at anyone else, but with this person, they've submitted to their will for so long, they're done. They're done staying quiet, done submitting. They finally reached the end of their rope, and unfortunately it took them all the way up until this point to finally set some boundaries and advocate for their needs, even if it costs them their relationship. They're finally willing to pay that price, and they simply don't care anymore. This person has caused them so much pain. They've neglected and dismissed them over and over. They were never a safe place for them. And they stayed, and they tried, and they tried, and they gave everything they had to this other person, and they have nothing left to give. And even if that person flipped, and now they want to do better, it doesn't matter. And while that makes sense, both things can be true at the same time. Contempt is present, and it's not going anywhere because it's understandable. But they're also staying in this relationship because deep down, they really do want it to work. But now, even if the person decides to change, even if they're trying to be a better person, the contempt is still right there. And they have no interest in patting them on the back for doing the bare minimum anymore. They have no interest in appreciating their efforts when there were years where they went neglected. They have no interest in essentially rewarding their good behavior when they haven't even understood how their bad behavior destroyed them for years. And even though deep down they want this relationship to work, contempt will still block any efforts to repair, because they haven't fully been honest with themselves or with their partner about how truly angry and hurt they are. And what's happening beneath the surface is that trust has been broken in large and small ways for years. It's a death by 1,000 paper cuts situation. And even if their partner says that they're willing to change, even if they are changing, it's not enough. There's a chasm of hurt. There's a giant wound, and their partner's throwing rocks into this chasm and wondering why they don't feel full, wondering why there's so much distance between them. And worse, there's a part of you that doesn't even want to work towards repair, right? Because you know repair means working towards actually forgiving them. And there's still so much pain. You're afraid of what it would mean to face it. You're afraid to be vulnerable with them and risk being hurt again. You've walled yourself off for good reason. And you're being pulled in two directions, but all you want now is to stay safe. And right now, anger feels safe. Right now, it feels good to give anger a voice. Right now, it feels good to finally have some control when you felt out of control for years. Right now, it feels good to finally let them know the truth that they're a self-centered narcissist. But we have to ask ourselves, once we get to that point, what are we working towards in the relationship? And so when I say contempt can destroy a marriage, sometimes I'm talking about the narcissistic people. And other times I'm talking about when contempt is simply a reaction from years of hurt and pain. And this is just the result. The problem is that when we aren't honest with that pain, when it just keeps harboring bitterness and resentment, nothing ever gets solved. We don't leave the relationship, but we're not actually staying in it either, even though we're still there. We're blocking it from moving towards healing, if healing is even possible. Now, can that situation be healed? It can. It's possible, but only if we fix the other two things we talked about today. We have to learn how to communicate, not from a place of resentment, but from honesty and vulnerability. And at least one partner has to learn how to listen and hear the pain underneath, hear the deep hurt underneath that anger. They have to be willing to actually understand the heartbreak that their partner feels and be committed to learning how to empathize and validate it. And not immediately, but over time, as that partner feels more safe to express and be vulnerable again, and as they begin to trust these new patterns as real and consistent, they can start to heal and a new relationship can begin. But the truth is, the old relationship has to die. And a new one has to be born with new agreements and new covenants. And both partners need to fully understand why the old relationship was dysfunctional and never want it to go back to that place. And even though I would love to prevent anyone from ever getting to that place and needing that level of healing, the truth is that so many of us will find ourselves there. So I will continue to pray for your healing. I hope this helped in some way, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.